exception of Councillor Christensen, are present, Your Worship.
I'm sorry, it's Madam Clerk.
Apology accepted.
Before we go... Okay, no need to rub it in. Before we continue, I just want to acknowledge that the land upon which we are located is the traditional territory of the Haudenosaunee, the Attawandaronk, and the Anishinaabe people, all of whom we recognize have been good stewards of the land, and we have an obligation to continue that stewardship. There are no other announcements, there is no addendum, and are there any declarations of pecuniary interest? There being none, I'm going to hand the chair over to you, Councillor Flagg, as the budget chair.
Thank you, Your Worship. We are fortunate again, as we always are, to have Jonathan Jansen with us this evening for a presentation on water and sewer operations.
Thank you, Councillor. Welcome to the 2026 water and wastewater budget. This is the second budget meeting for this year. All of the reports and appendices for tonight are on the town's website. We'll talk a little bit more about communications at the later stages of the presentation, but there's growing information online on our Let's Talk area as well. So let's dive in. This is your fourth water wastewater budget, so we could just, of course, skip right to the end and give you some rates and have a discussion on that, but that wouldn't be nearly as fun. And this item is not progressing the slides, so maybe I'll just use the keyboard or mouse. There we go. So a bit of an overview. We'll be looking at some of the key elements of our service delivery. We have here, of course, with us tonight, Acting Director Tommy Piesel, who oversees our water and wastewater divisions. So, and just a couple photos there to show, you know, how our crews are at work with our system. It's a lot of team effort with a lot of different staff contributing to the water and wastewater delivery in the town. For the budget, we'll look at inputs and rate setting and risks and opportunities, and then have any presentation questions. We'll then have questions for the report itself. And then we also have tonight, following that, the user fees report for the town. That's CBC 02 on our council agenda. So here's a bit of an overview of the number of customers. So almost closing in on 15,000, with most of that being residential. ICI there is our industrial, commercial, institutional type customers. But thankfully that is growing, just like with our tax levy. We do like to see a bit of a broader customer base there. The system is extensive. We'll talk a little bit about geography, as we always do later as well, but we have 354 kilometers of water mains, 202 kilometers of sanitary sewers, so pipes running all over the place. We're governed by a number of different areas, such as the Safe Drinking Water Act. The system itself, just for those following along as well, it is a separate full cost recovery budget, so separate from our levy budget that we'll be considering in January. We do make allocations from the property tax for different service areas into the water budget, but it is its own budget approved and legislated to have all of its costs recovered through the water and wastewater rates. We take great pride in our system, with it being reliable, safe, with good pressure and flow and availability with little downtime. And it really does truly, in terms of council strategic elements, add to the quality of life in the town. So on that, with geography and geology, we do in our system, with being a very large geographical municipality, have a relatively low number of customers that supports all of that infrastructure we looked at. The geology aspect is the cost of infrastructure tends to be higher than in many other comparator areas where we have high bedrock and low-lying areas relative to a lake that, as we all know, is prone to surges and lots of additional flooding in areas. So that certainly is a component of our system and what makes it unique. Water main breaks is one of the primary indicators in our system of how our system is performing and what our levels of service are for our capital system. It's been a difficult year in that regard, with 64 year-to-date water main breaks this year. Our average has typically been in the 50, and we've been seeing some great progress, as you can see from a couple of the other prior years in that regard, but that we've had an unusually large number of breaks this year, and that is impacted by different types of weather and how that impacts the infrastructure as well. Operational challenges, we do have a meter program. We would have already approved the meter replacement in our capital budget on November 19th. It aims to keep them up to date as meters over time, they do degrade and start to record less and be inaccurate with the reads. So that assists, that program helps that operational challenge. We're always wanting to ensure that metering is fair and accurate, and there's not any attempts to bypass that. We did share during our capital budget and earlier in the year as well with a report to council on some mitigation efforts there with new cellular technology being used to provide better reads. It also provides temperature and pressure monitoring that can detect meter breaks, so just helping us to be more responsive. As well, we have our citywide system, which is a software system that's helping to better manage workflows and work orders with our crews. Legislatively, just a bit of an overview of some of the key areas there. Of course, as municipal councillors, you have care of the overall system. We do note the regional billing methodology, their cost being the largest of the towns. The method on which that is done, we'll talk about as well later, but that is a challenge for the town in terms of paying our fair share. And then there's also other areas like risk of collections and system losses. I think we last brought a report this last summer in report IS 14 2025 to comment on our non-revenue water efforts, or our efforts to reduce non-revenue water or water that otherwise isn't able to be billed. Some of them are planned and known, like the graphic there with fire hydrants, but there are other areas we're always trying to ensure that we're mitigating and minimizing any loss of revenues through our water system. There's a section as well in report CBC 03 that does comment on additional efforts. This is just a bit of an overview. And here I would highlight the reduced infiltration into our sanitary sewer system. We'll see when we look at our regional treatment costs that the volumes that we experience overall have been coming down, and that is a reflection of some of these large capital investments the town has been making over the years to reduce some of that extraneous flow with some of the targeted sewer and manhole relining, maintenance hole rehabilitations, and so on. So just a little bit further on the regional billing methodology, the region, we have been advocating for that review, and the region did approve a review back in their 2024 report for the 25 budget. The goal for that is to be fair, equitable, and have stable allocation of costs to the local area municipalities that participate, and that the cost drivers are properly reflected. So as we move now into more of the budget, the inputs, we're looking at just overview of the different expenses in non-rate generating revenues. And then part two is then taking all of those expense needs and translating it into rates for our customers. So this year's budget is a proposed $27.6 million for all of the ongoing needs. And the second paragraph there that does highlight again the number of extensive areas that are involved through the town efforts with our customer services group and community services to billing and collections and IT and corporate services to then a lot of work in the service delivery area and engineering and operations with our infrastructure services group as well. But the graph on the right does show By far and away the largest component of the bill and of any of the increase we're considering in any year is the treatment costs. So on that, the wastewater charge, we'll look at that first and then the water charge. The wastewater charge truly is a 100% variable allocation. It sets in any given year a fixed amount based on prior volumes, but that is reconciled every year to actual volumes. So it truly, in that regard, while it's described at times as a fixed amount, it is based purely on consumption volumes. The 26 reconciliation adjustment based on 2024 actual flows, thankfully is a credit to the town of just over $1 million, you can see there. So, just to serve some memory there, we've included a graph this year to the right to show how we have gone through a number of years from 2016 to 2020, where we were experiencing larger charges. You can see in 2016, in fact, we had a commensurate charge, not a credit, but a charge of almost $1 million, just to show that the town does go through cycles. We would believe that a lot of this even is in relation to different lake levels and the seasonality or the cycles that has, but just to show that yes, right now we've experienced a few years of credits, but we're likely to swing back and forth over that reconciliation line. So the regional treatment costs in this budget that we're bringing forward is a net increase of $1.07 million or 4.2%. Of that, when I say net, because it's really two components, $1.5 million, and this is shown in Appendix 2 to the report as well, is based on the regional budget changes. So right now, it's a combined increase based on the regional report that's on the region website, of a combined increase of 9.4%, which is just a little less and a little over on the water and wastewater side. We've used that number based on comments in the reports and from information that we've discussed with them to be that same rate for 2027 in all future 5-year forecast periods. A note that the region budget is available online, but it will be reviewed on December 4th and December 11th with bylaws to follow. The report suggests that any regional budget change be repurposed to address Fort Erie's capital gap. Of note, the 9.42% includes over 7% of capital increases to address infrastructure deficits for the region. So any reduction in that rate for the region certainly would help the town's efforts as well, which is less than half of that increase in this year's budget, which we'll see later. So then the good news with the budget is that really we are benefiting by over $400,000 this year based on our share of the volumes of that budget increase. So our water volume share is down year over year 3%, and the wastewater volume share is down 2.5%. So then with town expenses and other revenues, it's thankfully overall, we'll look at another component, which is the financing and the transfers we use with our reserves, but it's a decrease in our budget of $22,000 or 0.1%. So this is great work, particularly with Acting Director Pizzo and others across the town in all the different areas we mentioned to really refine our share of the costs and find reductions and minimal increases. So that's an increase in some of the non-billed revenues of $6,500 for things like arrears interests and unmetered construction billings. Some of those are fees that you'll see as well in report CBC 02 later in the agenda. So those do help to defray some of this cost. Sorry, but the overlap there of the increase-decrease signs, but it's an increase to the wages and benefits of $134,000. No changes to the staffing complements. In 2025 budget, we did have this part 2 of phasing in a new water and wastewater supervisor, but there's no proposed changes for this year. And we do have this does capture all of the effects of the new collective bargaining agreement that is now in place for 2025 and expires at the end of 27. It's a decrease in materials and services of $90,000. This is mostly in response to some of the changes in some of the programs which we were hoping to realize in the last few years, but we have a reduced flow monitoring and sanitary sewer CCTV inspection program. Some of those were partially funded by reserves in the past, but not fully, so we are seeing the benefit of those programs coming down. In debt charges, it's a decrease of $70,000, and that's due to the matured or expired debt for the Crescent Park improvements. And we are proposing, in accordance with our budget policy, to reallocate those savings to our long-term infrastructure needs. And the next debt that matures for this budget is in 2031 for wastewater. There's some links and information here for the few of the programs we do to help financially assist those with need. The Water Emergency Relief Fund it provides a budgeted amount for low-income families, and these amounts are all based on historical trends and recent applications. Seniors Utility Relief Fund of $33,000 for low-income seniors, and there's information, again, for anyone that may see this or wish to have more information on the town's website in terms of eligibility, and application helps with that. And then as well, the extraneous flow reduction program. So this program helps us ensure that we're keeping our treatment costs as low as possible. Again, this does help our overall treatment volumes, and this is an increase of, so good news, it's an extra expense for the town, but we're seeing some uptake on this, which means our customers we're partnering together to reduce our inflow infiltration. So this is the financing and transfer side. We do have both capital and rate stabilization reserves available to the town, and we do use those, as the name implies, to stabilize our increases in our budgets. So this year is a net decrease in rate stabilization reserve transfers of $80,000, and that's primarily in relation to some of those programs winding down. So again, the share of funding that we would have applied in the past has also come down. And then a large key thing we're trying to do is increase capital contributions. So we've proposed 3% to address our AMP, or our asset management plan gap that council has seen in the last number of years. So of that, there's just over $3,400 that council would have adopted through the capital program. So any new assets, we aim to have the related amortization costs be approved so that we have funding in the future. The matured debt I mentioned of Crescent Park of $63,000 is the portion that matured, and that is proposed to then be put into long-term needs as well. And then we have an amount that previously we have approved of $288,000 approximately for the asset management needs. And then strategically, we will come up with different approaches to asset needs at times. And this year, the reduction in the treatment volumes that we're seeing from the town efforts, that benefit to the town, we are proposing to also increase the long-term needs. All of those add up to 3%, which, again, is less than the 7.25% that's included for the region, but for us, definitely represents a good effort to move the needle on meeting some of those long-term needs. So the actual financial strategy component of the asset management plan is in development. It was awarded to Hempson, who also did prepare the town's development charges study back in 2024. So that is aiming to be presented to council in the next month or two with various financial scenarios and funding options for rate impacts. When we reported to council back in July of 2024, we had noted the gap at that point as being $29 million. Due to some additional refined information and inflation and a number of factors. The updated estimate, unfortunately, is higher. It's at $37 million. That's for both water and wastewater and the levy. So these things seem continually out of reach, and it's worth a lot more discussion on and bringing forward a strategy to deal with that. We want to make sure we're properly addressing generational inequities or ways that in the past we haven't funded enough of the long-term needs, and yet not overburdening current taxpayers and ratepayers as well. So That financial strategy will consider a few different scenarios for that. And a key component will be the extent to which debt can play an increasing role. So we'll look at updating that as well. And of course, with that, always aiming to ensure we're maximizing grants. A lot of effort by our CIO and others to ensure that any kind of programs from the province and the federal government and others we're leveraging those to help reduce our long-term costs as well. And this one, when on the topic of trying to increase strategically the need, the graph at the right shows some of the reserve balances over the years. So while there's good news in those increasing, because we certainly have longer term needs than even in our 10-year forecasts. But what it shows right above that is the rate funded annual investment need. So when you look at the 2025 dollar column, for both of them, the annual need, we're told, is about $15 million annually. So when you see reserve balances of $5 and $6 million, you know, those are less than the annual need. So we're trying to have money in the reserve so annually we can keep the program going. But those reserve balances are woefully inadequate in terms of helping us in the long term by much more than what that shows. So on the rate setting, so we know we have a $27.6 million expense need for all of these treatment costs based on volumes and so on. So then we enter the rate setting part where we look to allocate those costs. We have needs of $16.3 million for wastewater, and wastewater has been growing at a faster rate than the water needs, driven primarily by treatment costs, and a water billing or a water program need of $11.2 million. And again, some other smaller factors for revenues there as well. And the volumes, we are pretty well in line in terms of when we set the rates for the consumption part, we want to make sure that it's realistic. You can see to the left, historically, we've budgeted, or we've been a little too optimistic on what we think we could bring in, but that line over time has come down. And more aligned going forward with what our actuals are. So it's just a little bit better alignment so that we're not overestimating our consumption revenue. So the base charge for 2026 is a proposed increase to $78.55. That really, as it says there, you know, does give the town better stability, sufficiency for predictable income. That does relate well to the driver of the costs, where the largest share of our costs is getting infrastructure throughout the town and running in front of customer properties. So that provides, or is a provision for that. The base charge for water is a 3.7% increase, and the wastewater is a 5% increase. In Niagara, the average for base costs is 46% of the monthly bill. We've targeted typically for it to be half, about 50%. So in this current year we're in now, 25, we were at 49%, and we've generally been within a few percentage points of 50%, although there's some fluctuation there. So with the base, Fort Erie is the second highest in Niagara. And again, that is due to a lot of the factors we've often talked about. We do share the municipal burden comparison, so just note this is for both the water and wastewater and the levy, and the reason of that is because there's a number of other factors, and there's transfers of costs, like I shared earlier, between the budgets that helps to look at the large picture. I do have better information as well on just the water and wastewater, but here you can see the good news here is that Fort Erie has actually slipped one. Last year we were right below average, but we have slipped overall to being lower than average this year. So there's just well in between us and the average. And you can see, although just note that the graph is shrunk there, but you can see the various totals by municipality there. Some volumetric. The current rate is combined for both water and wastewater is just over $4.91. That would propose to increase to 520.275 per cubic meter. That's a 7.4% increase. So it's been of the total increase for the water and wastewater program, it is weighted a bit more this year to the volumes than it is the base. And you can see some comparators for others in Niagara there. So a real broad range of rates. Obviously, you have some municipalities that are using a lot more of the base portion and some that are using a lot more in variable, to the extent that you see a very low volumetric rate of $1.77 all the way up to, I think it's Lincoln that's much more volumetric at $7.15. So then all of that would lead to the percentage-wise, know that this would be a 5.98% increase for the average household using 16 cubic meters per month. That's $5.36 a day, or a 30-cent a day increase from last year. And you can see that expressed there for both the water and wastewater, for both the fixed or base and consumption, and then also at the bottom for your monthly or an annual estimate of the change. By year, you can particularly see the impact of the regional rates, which is the line graph at the top. But you can see this is the historical 5-year, including 2026 proposed, with the town being the bar portion, showing both the capital efforts. So of the town's increase proposed in 26, you can see that a large portion is those capital needs and the capital efforts over the longer term. This is an overview of some of the risks of our system. Again, volumetric, less stable and secure and sufficient than having a higher base rate, but it does put us more at risk from larger changes in consumption. During the pandemic and otherwise, there would have been large changes. An aging population, typically per household, uses less consumption as well. And then just a number of other things. Weather impacts our water main breaks in many different ways, as well as consumption. Reserve reliance, we talked about in the financing section. Billing frequency, we have a couple of reports that have come to council in the past just to provide the basis for a council-approved approach for monthly billing for that, as well, again, the asset management needs and risks and uncertainties there. And then the opportunities, again, there are a number of key grant programs. Hughes F there, that's the Housing Enabling Water Stream Fund. And there's different funds. The CSO one is the regional one for combined sewer overflow. Some of these programs are more at risk as well in terms of long-term commitments, but we do maximize those wherever we can. A number of these other areas we have discussed and are commented in more detail in the report, if you want to look at those. So in conclusion, some of the key messages, the rates, when you combine all of that rate setting and everything based on 26 volumes that we're estimating, it's a total increase for the average household of 5.98%. That includes the regional impact of 9.42%, which represents 79% of the total billed increase. There's no new supplementary items proposed for 26. The capital is a key area of increase and reflects and supports all of the items that council adopted on November 19th, and no new debt for this budget. Communications, we do have a number of frequently asked questions on the town's website that are linked there as well. The Let's Talk Fort Erie budget page is continuing to be updated. This presentation is there for tonight. We've developed, I know we did receive feedback this year during budget planning to have more information available to customers with the new bills. So that's a proposed type of flyer that we envision going out early in the new year with the new rates to help communicate that and promote some of our different services and billing options. And that's it for the presentation. Turn it back to Councillor Flagg.
Thank you, Jonathan. Questions on the presentation? Councillor Noyes?
Thank you, Councillor Flagg. In regards to the not just what you said, but also the report here, the meter, like if somebody has a problem with their meter and they ask the town to come and check, we're raising it from $69 to $122. And my question is, what happens if the problem was the meter? Do they get their money back?
So I think that's on the next report, right? So maybe we
okay.
could just stick with this
That's
report.
right.
We'll move on and we'll talk about the questions on the next report.
Okay, the next one was the 64 breaks this year. Does that 64 number include the breaks that happened with construction? Like all the breaks or just the breaks?
That was a quick diversion.
Through the chair to you, Councillor, yes, that includes all breaks that happen within the system, including breaks that were caused by construction.
Okay. Do we know the percentage? Like, I mean, we can't, out of that 64, was it like,
Through the chair, we keep a rolling tally of all our breaks and what caused them. I'm happy to provide that info to you.
okay. Thank you. The other thing, okay, I guess I'll just probably go on the next.
The rest will wait for the report? Perfect. Anything else on Jonathan's presentation, Your Worship?
Yeah, first of all, I want to thank the director and his staff for putting all this together. I know that's taken a lot of time. I did want to look at slide number 9. This is the one where we talk about the regional billing methodology. And my questions were, Chair, part of the review has to deal with this 3-year reconciliation process. I guess that's my question. Does it?
So through the chair, yes, we would be looking at all of the different components of how it's built. So currently with the 3-year review, yes, that would be one of the components that we'd really want to make sure is looked at. The larger issue is just right now the fact that it's so much consumption or variable rate based. But yeah, dealing with that would in effect deal with the need right now to have a reconciliation charge.
And does the municipality monitor the methodology review that the region is undertaking? In other words, do we follow up to find out what the status of that is and how they're making out?
Yes, we were inquiring at the CAO level, at the treasurer level, and our hope is that we haven't, that I'm aware of, I don't know if the CAO has more recent information, but are asking to have updates as they become available.
Through you to the mayor to the question. So there are a number of items in addition to the 3-year rolling average that have been identified by the CAO's group. Most recently, we've distilled the working group down to a few CAOs, which includes myself and a couple of the treasurers to work on that. We'll probably enlist some of the public works staff as well on some of the more technical things, but there's a number of items in addition to the 3-year average. But to the treasurer's comment regarding the rate methodology, one of the items that we believe creates volatility in the billing is that variable rate, and it appears to be a fixed rate, but we've since uncovered maybe some correction in the methodology that would provide a more fair and equitable billing methodology, and so that's really the basis of our concern, and we'll be moving it forward, and I can provide updates as we have more information, but some of that work will be happening in 26.
Thank you. So if I might, Chair.
Absolutely.
Is there anticipation that a new billing methodology might be in place for 2027?
We certainly would hope it would be as soon as possible. I know there was discussion on whether or not there may be reference to what else is happening in the province, but we believe this is unique and important and really urgent in terms of the amount of dollars every year that are allocated out to the municipalities. I think with the funding in place and the lead time that's been there so far, I would be really anticipating this to be in place for our 2027 budget.
And if I might, on slide 13, which is the budget inputs, so the increase in regional treatment costs is net of what's called a town proportionate share adjustment. What is that?
Right, so when we take what we were paying in last year's budget for treatment costs, and we apply the increase of the budget, all things being equal, then it's the $1.5 million. We do benefit, or we pay charges and have credits in any given year based on volume changes, but we try to, in any year, just express it both as what's the purely budget increase component, and then what is the impact of our changes in volumes. And, the volume changes, I think there's lots of various degrees of investment across the region by municipalities in their system. We believe to the extent that we've invested heavily and have reliable, good funding in place, that, it is helpful to see the volume share going down for the town.
Okay, Joe, let me see if I understood that. So the regional treatment costs are increasing by $1.5 million. And that's based on their allocation of a portion of their total anticipated flows to the town of Fort Erie. And from that, we subtract the amount that we don't believe we're going to be using. So hence, we have a 3% reduction in our water volume and a 2% reduction, 2.5% reduction in wastewater. And that's the adjustment.
Yeah, we expect our total bill to be at the top bolded $1.07 million for 26 to the region. We're just showing a budget impact change and then a volume which does vary quite a bit from year to year, up and down. Just we're separating those two so that the net amount we expect to pay the region next year is the 1.07.
Okay, and then if we could go to slide 28. So this is the slide that conclusion, right? So whatever increase in our water and wastewater budget is, if the numbers remain the same here and at the region, and they're dealing with this on a preliminary basis tomorrow night, 79% of the increase is as a result of the region's charges to the municipality and its increase in its budget.
Through the chair, yes, and maybe just in simple terms to try and give you a sense of the impacts. If the region were to only be half of the town's budget in terms of costs, or 50%, and their increase was 9%, well, then the town would have to have a 3% increase to come to an average of 6% increase. So you can see that the town's portion, that's where you can see, and the numbers on both sides are a little bit more expanded or further out, but that's where you can see that the impact of the budget increase of the region is that 79%, and the town's portion is much lower.
Thank you. And the both of those budgets take into account allocations to capital in order to maintain the infrastructure. Is that correct?
That's right. In the one slide, it did note the increase proposed is 3% for the town for 26.
Are there any other municipalities in Niagara that you're aware of that would have such a large percentage of their water and wastewater bill to their residents, similar to the town of Fort Erie?
So I believe our financial strategy coming forward will have some better information finally. I mean, we've often talked about this both during capital and during the water budget. Just purely there's not as good comparable information as we would have hoped, even with the DWQMS, or the Drinking Water Quality Management System, that has financial forecasting requirements. With our financial information returns that we provide annually, still not anything that really truly speaks and gives municipalities benchmarking and comparators for that. But with the consulting with Hempson, we have asked for good comparators. We do express that in a few different ways. Some have newer systems, so when you look at the contributions based on age of systems and replacement values, we do see some variation. So the shorter answer is yes, we do see some that are more similar to what we are contributing, but there are a number of examples where, especially when you look at historically, the amount given as a percentage of a levy is considerably lower than what the town has been doing. And that's an testament to this term of council and to prior terms of council that have had really a commitment to that increase.
And if I might, Chair, so if the region continues on its course of 9.42% increases, which includes their allocation to capital, and that exceeds the towns, such as this year, that 79% is going to just keep going up, isn't it? Because a larger portion of what the Fort Erie water and wastewater ratepayers pay will be money that goes to the region.
That's right.
And then finally, if I might, Chair, I know that the provincial government requires a number of mandates with respect to drinking water, as an example, and that type of thing. Have we quantified in any way what that cost is in relation to what the water wastewater budget would be?
Through the chair, that's a great question. We do track a number of our different delivery areas with different chart of accounts that break things down with cost centers, but that would not be readily available. I understand your point, though, that, it has placed additional burdens, and we believe that there's likely more burdens coming too on the sewer side, as we've done with the water, but we could do some estimating of that, but it certainly has layered on additional requirements, and we've gone through periods where we've addressed that with staffing as well.
Finally, on the other hand, we do apply for provincial funding for some capital projects, and recently we've been successful in some respects with respect to some projects, either water or wastewater. Is that correct?
That's right, yes.
And we're going to continue to make applications?
Absolutely.
When we receive funding...
All day long.
When we receive funding from the province for a capital project that we've identified in this budget, can you just explain then what happens? We receive money from the province. What happens to what we've budgeted before we even knew we were going to get the funding?
Right, so currently in our long-term and even in our draft with the financial strategy, we are relying on some that we consider to be reliable and long-term, like the Canada Community Benefit Fund, or previously called the Federal Gas Tax, OSIF, the Ontario Community Infrastructure Fund that we receive. So those, although we are frustrated at times where there's not enough said to commit or to show that long-term commitment for the municipalities, there was recently a resolution shared with the town even of trying to get more of a commitment for that. But generally, when it's application-based, we're not relying on it because it's difficult to anticipate. We have gone through times where we've frankly been disappointed and there have not been as much award. And so we are conservative with relying on that. But to your question, yes, when it comes to being awarded for these, generally they're a substitution of funding to replace the town's reserve needs.
Okay, just so that I'm clear on that, we have a capital project in our water wastewater budget. We've identified transfer of funds from the rates that will be received to that project. We've applied for a grant from the province for the project. All or part of the costs are accepted, and we receive grant funding from the province. So the grant funding that we receive then is substituted for the money that came out of the capital reserves, and it goes back into our capital reserves for future capital projects?
Through the chair, that's right. So most recently, I think it was in our capital variance report in November, where when the town did receive funding towards the Walden project through one of the housing enabling programs, we did have council approve a substitution based on the size that it was to then. So even some of those reserve balances you would have seen in the graph would be benefiting at this point from those adjustments in the return of reserves or to reserves from those project commitments.
Right, thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Other questions? Good. Director Jansen, we know that you stand there and present this to us, but we also know there's a great team behind you. So please acknowledge that team for us and send them our appreciation for the outstanding report and work that you do.
Absolutely, will do. Thank you.
At this point, we'll get CBC 02 2026 on the floor. Thank you, Councillor Lewis. And questions? I know you've been waiting. Councillor Noyes.
Thank you, Councillor Flagg. My first question is about the meter. If somebody asks for their meter to be checked, we're raising it from the current fee of $69.50 to $122.20. I'm not arguing the reason for the increase, but if the person is correct that there was a problem with the meter, do they get their $122.50 back?
Through the chair to you, Councillor. So that fee is a different fee than the one you're thinking of. The fee to have your meter checked and have it sent out for testing is actually the $500 and change fee. That's the one that would be included, that they would get their money back if the meter deemed to be defective in any way. The fee that you're referencing is the fee for the meter download fee. That's above, and that's a fee that hasn't been in the past utilized too much. That is for a service that is above and beyond what our normal typical service level would be. So that is when a resident requests for their meter to be downloaded, if they're questioning the charges that are on the meter in between the time when we're collecting reads, that would be a full cost recovery fee for that fee.
Well, thank you for that explanation. Okay, so, but we have this new technology, or we're getting this new technology. Basically, it's going to let you guys kind of see what's going on out there. Would that not also kind of, if when Mr. Smith calls and says, I want to do the download, would that not, can that not be used for that or not?
Yeah, that is correct. Currently, we are rolling out the residential meters for Ward 2 right now, which will allow that feature. To adapt that feature into the whole town will take to approximately 2036 or 2038 for all the wards to have that feature. Until then, we need to have a fee in place for cost recovery for this.
Okay,
Go ahead.
let's say I'm one of the lucky people in Ward 2, and I have the new meter, and I ask you, are you still going to charge me the $122.20?
No.
Okay, that's the question. The next question I had was a long time ago, we're talking a long time ago, when you had the old meters, I think 2 meters ago, people would come by and they would use their gun and they would check the rating and they'd send it off, et cetera, to you. And I know that then we'd switch to this other meter that you have to do a drive-by, and the computer picks up all this wonderful information. And now we've even gotten one step further, right?
Yes, through the chair to you, that is correct. So we are constantly adapting and innovating new technology into the town. Previously, years ago, someone would used to have to walk house to house to house to collect the reads. The technology that was adapted about 10 years ago, a decade ago, allowed us to drive through every street of the town to collect the reads. And now we are moving to a new technology to allow for us to reduce our greenhouse gases, be more innovative, collect our reads more efficiently, and be more accurate in our water system.
And I can appreciate, I think that's absolutely the right direction to go in, but I'm just wondering, has it saved us in regards to cost for manpower and things like that with the new technology?
The new technology is being piloted this year. We won't know really until 2027 what Ward 2 is. We're going to compare our consumption values from the previous past to 2026, and then we will know what the cost-benefit analysis is.
Another question regarding this. I'm really amazed at this new technology when I'm reading up on it. And it's only in Ward 2, or it's only going to be in Ward 2 eventually, I guess, and then eventually the whole town. If there was an unusual reading, is there some kind of a warning on the thing that's saying beep, 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 like there's 200 gallons are going out every 5 seconds or something like that? Is it built into the computer that they could let you know that house number, Mr. Smith's house, is having a problem?
Through the chair to you, that's a great question. Yes, it does have that technology. So these new meters have specific functions that allow us to monitor for residential leaks. They also have beneficiary of pressure and temperature monitoring. So instead of having just specific hydrants within our system that monitor pressure and temperature, we essentially will have, when the whole town is done, 14,000 pressure and temperature sensors throughout the town to help us monitor water quality and monitor leaks in our system. But those meters do have features for leak alarms. So if we have seasonal residents that disappear for the winter months, we do have alarm functions that will notify us if they have high consumption or a leak within that house.
Okay, now, a further question on the meters again. These new meters, is the resident paying for the meter, or is that just absorbed by the town?
So the cost of the meters, that is part of our capital, that is part of our water meter reserve program that we put aside for the water meter replacement program. The water meters have a shelf life typically between 10 and 15 years, sometimes 20 years. The old mechanical meters degraded after 5 years or 500,000 gallons, so our efficiency rating was going down. So each of these wards are based on a capital replacement program at an age cycle when the meters needed to be replaced, which is funded through the reserve.
Okay, thank you. But a further question in regards to my usual question about paper billing. But this is a this is a different twist on this. Do we know, and I don't think Tommy would know this one, but do we have any idea on how many people we can now send them the bill online, and how many we're still sending them a paper bill? Do we have an idea of what the percentage is?
Director Jansen?
I did have that information available with me last year in anticipation of that question. I do not have it this year. So, we have made a number of efforts to increase that this year, which has been largely assisted as well by an unintended benefit of a postal strike, I would say. So that has grown this year, and we are capturing some of the related benefits of that with reduced postage costs, things like that, where we can. But I can get that to you as a follow-up.
And thank you for that, because one of the things I was thinking about is that have we thought about, besides having a postal strike, some kind of an incentive for people to join the like the online billing, like you get a $10 coupon for Tim Hortons or something, like if you, because in the long run it saves us money. Have we thought about any incentives to really kind of encourage them to do that?
Yes, we have. I mean, we've gone through a number of changes with our digital platforms and with our My Fort Erie website, and just even obviously a recent website change. But we have considered that. We have not offered any promotional type thing yet. We've used our social media and all our other channels to do that. But if that is something that, I do agree, it can help increase that. So we can provide more information on that as well.
Okay, thank you, that's all.
Other questions? Councillor Lewis?
Thank you. One question I do have with the financial incentive programs for the water, do those apply to those who are tenants or landlords only? Or both? I just don't know.
So currently we're dealing with CBC 02, which is the fees report.
Okay.
But we can come back to that later, I believe, as well.
I think there was a disconnect. The paper agenda has 03 before 02, so...
Yeah, and I do note there was that was included as an addendum. There's now different timelines for publishing budgets compared to the fees report, which is not subject to the same thing. So that's a bit of the background with why that was added a little after.
Okay, other questions on 02, 2026? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor? Opposition? Carried. And that'll bring us to CBC 03, 2026. Mover, put it on the floor. Councillor Dubanow, thank you. Questions? Councillor Lewis, do you want to ask the question here?
Yes, thank you. The question I have on this one is regarded to the financial assistance programs for low income. Do those apply to tenants or landlords of properties? And the reason for the question is some tenants pay the water bills outside of their rent, and I'm just wondering if they get captured or if they're able to take advantage of those programs.
Through the chair, in the case of that particular program, it is facilitated and managed extensively by the Salvation Army here in Fort Erie, and we do direct applicants through to them for those parameters and those requirements. I know I have limited information on that, but that is one I could also reach out to and confirm back.
Okay, yeah, that would be helpful. Thank you very much.
Sorry, I have two motions on my computer here. They're just duplicated. They are different on mine. So I just want to make sure that when we get ready to move this, I've got the right motion that we're moving. Okay, on the 2025, okay. Okay, all right, so it's just the first one on the computer then. Okay, perfect. I apologize for that confusion on my side. Other questions on 03-2026? Your Worship?
Yes, I had some questions with respect to Appendix 1, and that has to do with the 2025 budget, the 2025 actuals, which of course we don't have firm numbers because we're not at the end of 2025 yet, but then the relationship with the 2026 budget. And it looks like, as an example for the water, wastewater billings, we've simply added on to last year's budget without a critical eye on what the actuals were. I wonder if we could get an explanation for that.
Director Jansen?
So the billings for year-to-date 2025 would be up until the, this was run, believe that would be for 10/12ths of the year, if you want to use that as a guide for where we're at.
Yeah, okay, well then that would answer my other question. So the year-to-date actuals, that's just not to December, to October.
Right. And, you know, in our counting processes would be such that, you know, there would be a number of fourth quarter items for contracts and encumbrances and accruals and those types of entries that are not yet reflected in here.
Okay, and then, if I might, Chair, I'm not sure if you offered to do this, or whether I even asked for it when you did the presentation, but do we have some idea, or can we get an indication as to what other municipalities are putting into their infrastructure, their capital programs for water and wastewater, just so that we can take a look at that?
Through the chair, yes. Well, the financial strategy, I've seen versions of some preliminary presentations, and I believe we'll be able to provide some local and other comparators for that.
Right, because you know, it's pretty apparent that the town of Fort Erie is putting more money into infrastructure, whether it's water and wastewater, whether it's our asset management plan for levy-supported infrastructure like the roads and bridges and culverts and parks, et cetera, than other municipalities. And, you know, we frequently hear from residents about our water and wastewater bill. Part of the reason that it's higher is because we are putting more money into our infrastructure so that we'll eventually have a much more reliable infrastructure. And as you also pointed out, Jonathan, when you look at the map of Niagara, municipalities like Grimsby, St. Catharines, some of the others, Welland even, Port Colborne, have much smaller geographic areas than Fort Erie. And we have, aside from a large geographic area, we have a very spread out urban area in 5 particular nodes. And so that in itself is a challenge. As the community grows, there will be more customers per mile of infrastructure for water and wastewater that should have a positive benefit. And I believe that over the years, over the last several years, some of the other municipalities in Niagara have had to increase their charges significantly, whereas we've pretty much maintained a steady course. But Fort Erie has now, since at least 2012, been allocating a set portion of the increase either in the levy or in our water and wastewater rates to our infrastructure. Had the region done this since 2012, or heaven forbid, since 1970, they wouldn't be in the predicament that they are now. And unfortunately, their infrastructure covers the whole region, so that whatever the shortcomings are throughout Niagara, each and every resident of Niagara is obligated to contribute through their rates or through their general levy. We can't change the past. Obviously, we can try to change the future. But I think it should be clear to the residents of Fort Erie that, A, we have paid a lot of attention to our infrastructure, and that has a cost. B, we have to contribute to the regional costs. And as you've pointed out, that's 79% of the bill. So that each and every resident of Fort Erie that receives a water and wastewater bill should recognize that 79% of that goes straight to the region. Some for treatment costs, but a large portion for their capital needs now that they're trying to deal with those. So I just wanted to make that clear. And then finally, I wanted to reiterate what the budget chair has said about you and your staff. We show up on an evening, you do a presentation, we get a report, we ask a few questions, and then it's done. People have, I think, to appreciate the fact that hours and hours and hours of work go into your preparation of this water and wastewater budget. You have a very dedicated and talented staff. It's the same thing with respect to the general levy. There are many, many staff members contributing in the various departments. Hours and hours of work goes on. This material that we've seen tonight isn't the first time we've seen it, and over the course of the last several months, in our various subcommittees, we do get an idea of what's coming down the line, and there is dialogue between staff and council. So I want the public to appreciate the fact that we don't just show up at 6 o'clock on December the, whatever day it is, 3rd, and an hour and a half later, bingo, bango, bongo, $27 million budget has been passed and approved. There's a lot of work behind this, and you know, we're all ratepayers here as well. We all have homes. We all pay rates. So it's important to us. If we have family in town, they pay it as well. So we're not trying to stick it to the residents. We're trying to make sure that we have a sustainable infrastructure, that we have good, reliable source of drinking water, and that we can meet the stormwater demands of our residents. I'm not going to suggest that we're perfect, but we're certainly committed to making sure that the residents have good service, and those are some of the various components of what goes into an evening like tonight. And I want to commend you as well, Chair. You do an excellent job.
Got a couple of other, I just want to make sure Madam Clerk has Councillor Christensen has arrived at 7 o'clock. Bingo, bango, bongo. Councillor Dubanow.
Yeah, thank you very much, Mr. Chair. And again, thank you for the work you do chairing this. It's budget time is always fun. So I know Mr. Jansen and his staff. I was very fortunate during my first term of council to serve on the Corporate Services Business Subcommittee. So I even though I haven't been there for the last little bit, I did see the work that they do and the effort they put in. And it's not just a one night, it's not even 1 month. This is an entire year. Right when they do this, they're already planning for the next. So I want to commend staff. Now I'm going to lament about, entering my 8th year as a councillor, and, every year, and we have good staff here. I think we've been very responsible with the increases and the way we funded our reserves. I know it's been viewed very positively even by the province. They've been surprised at the effort we've put in. I'll never remember or never forget the Ministry of Infrastructure staff, their heads flying up at my first AMO when we mentioned how far ahead we were. So I mean, we have a track record and it's defensible, and we know that the money we're spending is being put to good use. But it's frustrating for me as a councillor. And I've got, we have our wheelhouse here, and we deal with what we can here to the benefit of our residents to ensure sustainable infrastructure and a level of affordability. But I don't have a vote or a say at what the region does, and it's 79% of our bill, and it's a little frustrating to 60, sorry, I heard the 79 from his worship. I know Councillor Noyes. Yeah, so it's frustrating, and, you know, I hear from residents, and, you know, I certainly, the mayor raised an excellent point about our density of connections. I actually had a discussion with a resident about that 1 to 2 weeks ago, about how I think we have one of the lowest densities per connection. I think we are the lowest in Niagara and one of the lowest in the province. So when you know, when a former mayor of another municipality chirps or, you know, throws shade about what our water rates are, you know, that mayor only had one sewer pipe to worry about in his municipality that connected two areas, and they got all their water from another municipality. So it's not fair. Those comparisons are not appropriate. We do the best we can. It's just very frustrating to look at decisions that have been made by other levels of government, not necessarily with Fort Erie's interest in mind, that we have to essentially deal with, and residents in this municipality have to pay for. I think it's very appropriate that the CAO working group is looking to ensure equitable billing among the region, and the way we deal with you know, the rolling averages of water wastewater charges. I've always questioned that, particularly when you have larger municipalities in the region with different interests and different voting habits and what have you up at regional council. And you know, I hate to say this, but I become very cynical about how they do things. And this is not a slight against our regional councillors in Fort Erie. I think we have an excellent mayor who's doing a great job as a budget chair to try to herd cats, which, you know, you've got 32 people up there. That's probably the best description for it. And I know Councillor Insin is always, you know, trying to light a fire underneath everyone to kind of say, look at this, you know, what can we do? So I say this every year. It seems like it's a broken record every year that, you know, we're stuck with this. And I say this for the benefit of the residents. You know, we're a good group of people here. We are truly looking out for the best interests of the residents in this community. We're not trying to, you know, gouge people on water rates or do anything like that. We are doing the best we can with what we've been handed. And the water wastewater budget, for me as an individual councillor, is always the most frustrating thing to deal with every year, because it's the one with the highest input costs that we have no control over as local councillors. So I say that for the benefit of the residents. I say that every year. It feels like a broken record, you know, going into I think this will be the 8th time or 7th time I've said that. But I appreciate the work that the staff do. And I guess keep on trucking. One day at a time, we'll deal with what we have to do. And I appreciate the effort of everyone. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Dubanow. Others, Councillor McDermott.
Well, this will be my 12th year. And, you know, we started by putting a lot of money into infrastructure around here and thinking that it's going to help our rates somewhere down the line. But it doesn't. And the big problem with that is it doesn't really affect people that have means. It affects people that don't have. It's a big problem. It's like low-income households may spend a larger portion of their income on water bills, making it harder to afford other essentials. I can't put a happy face on a 9% increases on anything. And there seems to be, even with such a great budget chair, that people aren't getting the message. You know, it's not just this. It's the police. It's everybody else. We'll give the police 10%. But when it comes to people and their water bills, well, I know a lot of this has to do with probably not keeping an eye on the price there with your pumping stations and your plants that you need to keep things going. Not as proactive as us with the amps. But, you know, I vote for a lot of crap sometimes around here. I really do. I'll go home and question whether that was a right decision or a wrong decision. But this affects just middle-income people that are going to find that 9% increases in water and wastewater. I guess the question is, how long is it going to be that they can sustain these increases? Because a lot of people, even with good jobs, go in the grocery stores, they're paying all kinds of money for groceries that they wouldn't have paid before. So when does that end? And how does that, how do we fix that? Being municipal councilors, we only have a few little things that we can do. And we can either vote for this, or we can show our displeasure if not. Irrespective, the water's got to keep flowing. So I can't vote for this. I just feel that as politicians, I think I know everybody around this table care about those people out there. And taxing them into oblivion is not one of our things that we want to do. And I think probably this is the first time since I've been here that we're actually debating this. And it's an exercise that I think we have to do, because sitting still, not saying anything, and I think the mayor will tell you, I watch regional council too. I have not seen people in that budget standing up asking questions, not a whole lot. So I'm beginning to say, it's not a perfect world. You're not up here asking questions. What's the matter with you? But we are. So I think, Jonathan, you've done a great job, as you always do, and so does your staff, but I never question that. It's not your part of the budget that I hate. But thank you.
You're welcome. Councillor Lewis.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I just want to start by saying I agree with many of the comments that have been made around the table tonight, in particular Councillor Dubanow and McDermott, who mentioned our two advocates at the regional level who continue to bang their drum and do the good work there that you need to, because as Councillor McDermott mentions, from what I've seen, which is minimal at the regional level, there doesn't seem to be a lot of discussion, which is quite disappointing. I do have a couple of questions here, and just bear with me because I've written them all over the place. One of the questions I had was, in 2023, we used money from reserves to offset the costs for consumers, and I believe our reason was given economic climate, which I don't think today is any better than it was probably in 2003, and maybe in many ways worse for many people. I believe that was, at that point in 2023, a 4.25% increase, which worked out to just under $6 per household. And then subsequent years went up from there. My question is, in 2023, the money that was used from reserves to offset the costs for consumers, was that money replenished? And if so, what's the story behind the replenishment of funds from that removal out of the reserves in 2023? I hope that makes sense.
Director Jansen, do you have an answer for us?
Yeah, through you, Chair, to Councillor Lewis. The town, with the rate stabilization reserves I mentioned, we do use those to stabilize the rates, and in that year it was used to reduce it from 5.25 to 4.25. Those reserves have a number of different draws and needs. Of course, the reconciliation itself is the largest one, where the risk with moving from credits to charges and back is to have something that can stabilize. We have these reserves, and we do show over the forecast periods them being used. And to answer your question, the actual funds in that case, we have had both deficits and surpluses with our water operations over the last, generally every year. And the year that followed, we did have a surplus that was used to, in that case, particularly replenish the reserves.
Thank you. And if I can continue, where would our reserves be today versus where we were in 2023? Are we relatively the same in terms of reserve health, or worse or better?
With the rate stabilization reserve, I have information here that would go back a few years. Though we have used them and funded them in various points. I know the audited opening balance for 2024, for example, had a sewer reserve of just over 2 million and a water rate stabilization reserve of 1.4. So they have hovered around within a range of, in each one, we have targets based on the annual rate, based on the town's approved reserve policy of a percentage of the total budgets, but they've generally been around those targets.
If I may continue, so, and thank you for the answer, so that would mean that we have healthy reserves and we continue to try and keep healthy reserves.
That's right.
And then what would a 1% decrease in this budget look like in terms of dollar to budget? If we were to take the same approach as 2023 of applying that to the consumer?
That would be about $260,000. Currently, where the rate revenues themselves are about 26 point something million dollars, so about 260 or so thousand.
Okay, I'm going to hold my time right now just to see if I've asked everything. There might be a few other councillors that wish to ask questions as well. Thank you.
Councillor Noyes?
Thank you, Councillor Flagg. I'm going to go back to the breaks, the 64 breaks, but not really going back to them, because in my mind, I always envision that a break is like a crack or a separation of the pipes. And that's what we see. And we see the water coming to the thing, and we see the trucks coming and the difference. But what I was, I wouldn't say amazed, I was somewhat surprised when I saw, because Ott Road has been done recently, and right across the street, I guess it would be called a water leak, but the infrastructure was so old that the water pipe itself had holes all the way through it. I don't think would ever rise to the surface, but when they dug to, because they were replacing the water lines and that, and the break was before the meter, so the resident wasn't doing, there was still water going through the pipe, but probably as much water that was going through the pipe was also coming outside the pipe, and it had all these pinholes through the pipe, and I'm just wondering, like, Ott Road, the water pipes there were quite old. Is there any way that we can capture that? Like, I mean, there was significant, I mean, they actually had to bring a pump in to pump out the hole that they dug because of this, because now the ground wasn't against the water pipe. So of course now the water, the pipes with the holes, the water kept coming out, and they actually had to pump it out for a few days until they could actually replace the pipe itself. So I don't know if we would call that a break. I don't know what we would call it, but how can we track that?
Acting
Can
Director?
we even track it?
Through the chair to you, Councillor, I would need to be more specific on the incident that it was, whether it was a water service or was it the water main itself?
It was the water going into the house.
So on the water service?
Yes.
So the water service is typically material that is metallic in substance, tends to, we are in an environment where soil is corrosive, which causes pinholes in the water service. They're usually harder to track and harder to find, but through our proactive leak detection programs that we have in-house, we do listen and we are able to track substantial service leaks. They are harder to locate due to we use acoustic testing to locate water main leaks, and the smaller pinhole leaks don't put off quite the sound and the vibrations allowed for us to track it. So it is a little bit harder to track.
Thank you for that. I was really, when you're watching the water leaking out of these holes, you're thinking, okay, this is, and it's before the meter, so that would be the extraneous flow. So just to thank you for that explanation, how we can capture it. Thank you.
Other questions? Councillor Lewis, back to you.
Thank you. And another question, Mr. Jansen, if you can ask, the surplus in 2023, was that largely due to factors like low lake level, low saturation of groundwater? Like, what were some of the other factors that might have gone into a surplus in 2023? if you have that right now.
I would have to go back and look at the report to council that would have come with the audit to comment on those general factors. Largely, we're impacted by weather when it comes to consumption, so a hot, dry summer would have led typically to larger consumption. A very difficult winter, of course, contributes to other factors like water main breaks where there's prolonged and deeper frost, things like that. So it is difficult without going back and looking at that report, but it's largely, those two would be the largest factors in any given year. And yes, treatment volumes are definitely impacted by lake levels and other, prolonged, even larger snow melts have an impact to the treatment costs.
Thank you. And I guess and thank you for that answer. I guess my question is more to council in terms of if we're looking at similar patterns to weather as an example for the surplus that might have contributed to 2023. Certainly same economic climate as 2023. If we should be considering a repeat of 2023's 1% from reserves to offset with the understanding that it would either come through any surplus revenues to be replenished or a replenishment into the levy in the next budget. Not directed at anyone in particular, but it is our collective decision, and I don't know if we've really had any conversation about that.
Your worship, you...
Yeah, just to follow up on that. So looking at the reserve information that was provided during the capital budget meeting, so it's anticipated that the opening balance in 2026 for sewer is 2.8 million. By the end of 2026, if everything goes according to projections, it would be 3.5 million. And the water rate stabilization at the end of this year is around 1.3 million, but could be 1.2 million going forward. If I could, to Mr. Jansen, so the larger costs associated with capital infrastructure relate to wastewater, do they not, as opposed to water?
That's right.
And the rate stabilization fund is designed specifically to assist us in terms of fluctuations in rates, maybe arising out of the 3-year cycle that the region utilizes.
Yes.
So even if at the worst year was, I think, $1 million that we had to pay the region. That was in 2016 or thereabouts. So even at that, if we were to draw money from the sewer rate stabilization fund, even if it was only 1%, that at least brings down the bill for the local ratepayer to 4.9%.
That's right.
Okay. What's the argument as to why we wouldn't consider doing that this year?
So the longer term, the forecast, so the 10 years that we use that relates especially to the capital side, but even the operating side, we are showing those rate stabilization reserves getting used over the 10 years and coming down. So we're consistently using them. We're trying to avoid larger one-year usage that creates future year impacts. So for example, for the sewer rate stabilization, it's coming down to over the 10 years to $1.2 million, and the water rate stabilization is coming down to $700,000. So leaving something in there as well, still for the contingencies, the unknowns, the reconciliations, but that is more of the argument for keeping something and continuing to rely on them as well. We're not imagining we keep them at unusual levels like they are now, because if you look at the 2016 to 2020 pattern that we had, it's not just a 1 year, $1 million charge. Over that period, it would have been almost even close to 3 million perhaps in terms of those charges. So that is where the risk and the caution is in having something for those needs. We don't want to be overly optimistic with, some of the discussions we're having on methodology. We would be somewhat hopeful that there will be some adjustments there that will change that allocation. But But that graph in particular shows a multi-year impact that this reserve would be used for.
So I have a couple of thoughts. The first thought is, what happens over the next 10 years? I have no idea. And nobody knows what's going to happen over the next 10 years. One of them could be that the province decides that water and wastewater is going to be taken away from municipalities and become part of a service board. That no longer benefits, that no longer affects our operation here. And if that were to be done, I'm thinking that all of the reserve funds go to the new service board. I don't know what the other municipalities have in terms of reserves, but I do know that most of the municipalities do not have infrastructure in the condition that we have, which means that if that were to happen, our residents, if one were to speculate, our residents will end up helping to pay for the improvements to infrastructure in other municipalities. I'm very much inclined to support the direction that Councillor Lewis is suggesting, simply because our residents need help now. And 10 years from now, well, I guess we can figure that out over the next 10 years, and who knows whether the town of Fort Erie will even be doing this type of meeting then. So I'd be fully supportive of a resolution from Councillor Lewis to utilize $270,000 from one of these reserve funds to reduce this year's town of Fort Erie water and sewer rates.
I think I'll go back to Councillor Lewis.
I see Councillor Noyes wants to speak, but just to further the mayor's comments, we saw a previous provincial government try to fix hydro on the backs of one generation, and we saw how that didn't work. And I'm looking at this as very similar, and the mayor's made some good points about, we don't know what the future brings. I know this council would certainly be committed to replenishing the reserves because we understand the importance of having the reserves, but they are there for a reason. And as the mayor's mentioned, I think that reason might be today, but I'll hold off on moving the amendment or the motion until everyone's finished, because I did see one other hand go up, Mr. Chair.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Noyes.
Thank you, Councillor Flagg. I just wanted some clarification, and I'm in support of Councillor Lewis's thing too. But in some of the dialogue that I heard was that we could replenish it next year or the year after, and perhaps through the general levy. I don't think you can, because I think there's legislative requirements that you can, that several years ago that water and wastewater had to be removed from the levy, and you couldn't use the levy to offset your water and wastewater. So I know that was one of the comments that Councillor Lewis made that I just want to clarify. It has to come from water and wastewater rates down the line. We can't add it to the general levy, and I think I'm correct on that. And I think one of the concerns that we've had other times is that we don't think, and we can't be sure, but there's been some speculation that some of the other municipalities have not taken their water and wastewater costs into their water fees, but have, I wouldn't call it, are keeping some of their, what should have been in water and wastewater, into their general levy. And that kind of keeps their water and wastewater down, but it increases their general levy. And we have no way of proving that, but that's kind of the feeling I think some people had. That's all, but I am in support of Councillor Lewis's motion.
Creating a swale for diversion, I like that. Okay. Councillor Lewis, I think everyone's looking
Thank you.
at you.
One last question before I move this. In terms of staff recommendation for which reserve fund to use the $270,000 for, any recommendations there?
It's a bit of a loaded question because, when we look at the challenges, and there's some really, really excellent comments here and some context, some long-term views, shorter-term views. I would, again, point to the asset management slide that shows, that our annual need for our budget to be carrying our asset needs is $15 million a year, and we're giving $5.5 million. So yes, that's a very nuanced conversation. We compare it differently across the area, but in that regard, a $250,000 to $70,000 adjustment is just in a way setting us back marginally, but I do appreciate the overall context. So, the infrastructure, I mentioned that because the infrastructure gap is stronger from what we know on the wastewater side. However, the way we've built our wastewater reserve with some of the threats and risks there is also larger. So I would suggest we use the wastewater reserve at this point, with it being the larger of the two, the rate stabilization reserve. So the amendment would be to reduce, and I think given the recommendations we have in the report being focused on the rates themselves, I can work all those through. In fact, I have a version of that can help expedite us tonight, that the clerk can capture and amend the recommendations for, because it really just does deal with the rates. So to capture a reduction in the total rate, the blends, of course, the towns and the region's cost, to get to that 4.98 instead of 5.98%. Those changes to the rates, just give me one moment, and I will provide that to you.
Thank you, Mr. Jansen. Now, I'll move a motion to recommend using $270,000 from a reserve resource recommended by staff to achieve a 1% decrease, if that's satisfactory. And then that allows you the opportunity to work with staff to figure out which reserve would be most appropriate, as opposed to on the fly at the 11th hour. So that would be the motion.
Okay, good. All right, so we'll discuss the amendment. Give me 1 second, Director. Councillor Dubanow.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. I will be supporting this because I think it's important that we do what we can within our power here to help residents as best we can in these challenging times. The mayor raised some good points about the reserve and how none of us can predict the future and where we're going. And it's always frustrating for me, again, lamenting, as I do often, about the region, that, there's a potential for the hard work that we've done here in the municipality to benefit others when we were the ones who made the sacrifices for it. I do have one question for the treasurer, though, if he has a moment. And through you, Mr. Chair, I'm just wondering, with respect to a water stabilization reserve, is this something common among municipalities, or is this something Fort Erie put in place to kind of stabilize rates to ensure that we don't have wild swings year to year?
Through you, Chair, I'm not too familiar with seeing that with others. I know we've deemed both serving that real intent and purpose of stabilizing rates. In years, we have used that, and this is what I do show annually in the slides that show that the changes in the transfers, where we will increase them in some years, where we see over the forecasted period a decreasing need or an increasing need. So I can't speak too clearly to what others have, but for us it has served us well.
Thank you. And if I may ask one other question, and I think Director Jansen kind of hinted on it already. So in your opinion, that has been a benefit to Fort Erie ratepayers, that has kind of made it a little easier to manage rates year to year. Would that be your opinion?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you. So in light of that we have this reserve, and it does benefit residents, and whether the director recommends a different reserve or something else, the fact remains we have these in place to benefit our residents. I will be supporting this, and just one comment before I yield my time. I love the fact that we're having a discussion among council right now on how we can help residents to deal with these rates during these challenging times, and getting an honest answer from good staff who are giving us a direct picture on our asset management challenges, financial challenges, and the fact that we're having this discourse here. And I certainly hope, I haven't seen it. I love to be proven wrong when I become cynical. I love to be proven wrong that I shouldn't be cynical, but I hope that similar frank discussions happen at the region. I hope that they get good advice from staff who are looking out for the residents, who first and foremost pay the taxes that employ them and provide the services across the region. I know we have two great regional councillors here who bang that drum every day. I hope the other 29, 30 regional councillors do the same thing. And with respect to that, I will yield my time. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Dubanow. Councillor McDermott, and then I'll come back because I know you're going to give us numbers that will change, I believe, the motion so that we can get the numbers correct on that. Correct, yeah. Councillor McDermott.
Thank you. I just want to thank Councillor Lewis for bringing this forward. You know, some people will think this is just a little step, but it's certainly a step in the right direction, and hopefully it brings the best out in us, which like it did tonight, I think. I think tonight this is probably the best conversation we've had in some time. And I don't think, because it's an election year, we're talking about this. We're talking about doing the right thing, and I think I think this is a good start. I hope they start doing the right thing at the region so we wouldn't have to have these comments. But I'm certainly appreciative of everybody that sits around this table and every staff member here. Appreciate it.
Thanks, Councillor McDermott. Okay, we'll go one more here with Councillor Christensen. Come back to you, Director.
Through you, Chair. I would also like to support, indicate that I will support Councillor Lewis's motion. I will say, and I said this in 2023, I've had a long experience with the challenge of replacing reserves when they are used for immediate pressures. And I think that the work that was done in the previous certainly gives me confidence in both the staff and council's decision-making that it will in fact be replaced. I'm very much a supporter of reserves that are sufficient but not overly, as Mr. Jansen pointed out. I would also say that I support both the respect that we're trying to show to taxpayers in Fort Erie, to our residents, with the stress, the economic stress and other stresses that they're facing and have faced for a number of years. I think we're still rolling out post-pandemic, and I think it's impacting everyone. And the final thing, I would like to thank the Mayor for taking the longer look and then putting the longer look in perspective, because I think here we have very specific experience where we can predict certain behaviors with respect to our short-term attempts to be responsible, and then finding that in fact we are supporting the less effective decision-making of others. Thank you.
Well. All right. Director Jansen, can I assume that you have different rates here then for us now?
Yes, so Cole here is going to provide a revised slide for slide 24 that would capture this 1% reduction. So here you can see with the wastewater line.
Just hold on.
Just a point of order. We need to, before any of this becomes remotely relevant, we need to pass the amendment. So I think we should pass the amendment first, Chair. That's my suggestion. You're the chair. You get to decide.
So your amendment is to,
My
please.
amendment would be to use $270,000 from reserve resources recommended by staff to achieve a 1% decrease in a 1% decrease. And it was 270 that you.
Yeah. And this where, I mean, I appreciate that to have the amendment on the floor, but if I can, in terms of amending the actual recommendations in the report, the amount will be, specific to accomplishing that. But if I can give a 1%, what I know to be a 1% reduction with the appendix and so on, if I can give those rates, then really you would just be making the motion for a 1% reduction to accomplish, the rates that I can provide. But I would rather it be the focus on the 1% and then allow staff to work backwards with that amount.
Okay, so I'll correct myself. I'll move to direct staff to use reserve funds to offset achieving,
To reduce.
yeah, to decrease by 1%.
Right.
But it's too many times it keeps changing.
To reduce the increase by 1%.
Correct. Yes, reduce the increase by 1%.
Madam Clerk, you good? Yes? Okay. All right, so we're good with that. You're better with that?
Yeah.
Okay, good. So we will now vote on the amendment. All those in favor? Opposition, that carries. Great. We'll move back to the main motion as amended. And Director Jansen, did you have anything to speak to that with?
Yeah, I'll put the revised slide. It does show some of the daily impact changes. So then really in the darker blue top image there for wastewater, whereas previously the recommendation of the report was for, let me just get the original one. In the recommendation, the second that, the first two bullets for water rates would remain the same, but then the third and fourth bullet will change with this amendment to have the 2026 wastewater base rate per month, instead of being $48.99, be now $48 as seen in the fixed monthly charge and 49 cents. And then the fourth bullet that the 2026 wastewater rate per cubic meter be adjusted from $3.315 to $3.25 as noted here. And so then here you can see the impacts, whereas previously the difference was $9.20 per month or $110 per year. Now it is $7.66 per month or $92 per year. And if I just might make a couple other comments, I know earlier it was shared, just that 79%. Of course, that is the impact to this year's budget and change, but as the earlier graph and even as the flyer suggests, it is more in the range of 61-62%, will also be adjusted based on this. And then as well, I do want annually to give thanks and just don't want to ever miss anyone, but certainly this would be the last year with the retirement of our Revenue and Collections Manager, Jillian Corney. So we are going to wish her well into retirement, and this will be her last budget. So many thanks to her and her many years of service. So many others. The presentation tonight, assisted by Sonia Bovan, Nanette General as our coordinator of financial planning analysis. Lots of effort, as our staff would know, in coordinating a lot of things. I don't know that I should go on record as saying it's herding cats, but it's tantamount to that at times with our own staff and others like Carly Griffin, working through our quarterly variance reports that informs a lot of the information that goes into this, and of course, so many across many departments, as noted earlier.
Thank you, Director. All right, that'll bring us to the vote then on the main motion as amended. All in favor? Opposition carries. And I believe that will bring this to a close, and I'll turn the chair back to you, Your Worship, if you're ready.
Thank you very much, Councillor Flagg. Excellent job. This is a challenging budget, and I want to commend all of you for the time and energy you've put into this and the thoughtfulness you've brought to bear on this discussion. I have on the agenda scheduling of meetings, but I don't think that's necessarily accurate. The next budget meeting is when? January 28th, and that is here, and that is at 6 p.m., and that will be the library and the general levy. Okay. There being no other business, Councillor Dubanow, would you like to move to adjourn?
Yes, I would, Your Worship. I'd like to move that Council and Budget Committee adjourn at 7:45 p.m. this evening.
All those in favor? Another unanimous vote.